Everybody, it is Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight, we're going to do something that I haven't done before. Um, Maybe it's going to work out, maybe it won't. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it will. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read three separate articles, three interrelated separate articles. One of them is by Warren Mosler, one of them is by Randall Wray, and the other one is by Stephanie Kelton. Now, why did I pick these three articles versus other articles? First things first, Warren created this. MMT used to be called Mosler Economics. It's transformed into what is now known as modern monetary theory. The second thing is Randall Wray was one of the original developers, and his work goes hand in hand with Warren's work. And then Stephanie, who was part of the early development team, she is very much on point on the political end of this. So what I wanted to do is basically give you the nuts and bolts, the rationale, and then the political implications of each of these things. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with Warren Mosler's, awesome article. And I'll put this up here on the screen so you can actually see it while I'm doing it. Hopefully you'll be able to read it. Here we go. And let me get this over into the screen for you all, and we'll go from here. So for those of you who can read this, great. If you can't, just listen to me and my soothing voice will read it for you. So this here came out in July 17th, 2009, and this is from the man, Warren Mosler. And it starts out, Federal Taxation for Dummies. He says, so why does the federal government tax us? No, not to get money to spend. In fact, if you pay your taxes with actual cash, they give you a receipt, a thank you, and then throw your cash into a shredder. True. So how does taking your cash and shredding it pay for anything? It doesn't. And suppose you pay by check. When the check clears, all the federal government does is change the numbers in your checking account downward for the amount of the check. They don't get anything. And so how does the federal government actually spend? When they write you a check and when the check is deposited, they change the numbers in your bank account upward by the amount of the check. This doesn't use up anything. They just change numbers. Just like when you score a touchdown and get 6 points, the stadium gives you 6 points, but those points doesn't come from anywhere, and the stadium isn't using up some pile of points it has when you get 6 of them. Federal Reserve Chairman Bernanke made this exact point when Congress asked him where the money for the banks was coming from. He told them the Fed just changes the numbers in their Fed bank accounts. So this means operationally, federal spending is in no case dependent on tax revenues or borrowing. The federal government can't run out of money, as the president has been telling us. It doesn't have any to run out of. All it does is change numbers in our bank accounts. So then why does the federal government tax us? Answer: to take away some of our spending power. Why would they want to do that? Because if it didn't, then our spending, all of our income and profits we make, plus all the federal government spending, would overwhelm the markets and would cause prices to go higher and higher. There would be too much spending power chasing too few goods for sale. That's called inflation. So what does the government do? They tax us to take away some of our spending power. So their spending combined with our spending doesn't cause inflation. That's why the federal government taxes us, not to get money for them to spend. They don't use money when they spend. They just change numbers in our bank accounts. So what's the right amount to tax? If they tax too much, we don't have enough spending power to buy what's left for sale after the federal government is done with its spending. And that's exactly what's happening now. We can build a lot more cars and houses and other goods and services that we'd then like to buy. But the federal government has taxed away too much of our spending power. So sales are way down and unemployment sky high. Now, mind you, this is 2009, folks. Can the federal government go broke or run out of money if it taxes less than it spends and runs a deficit? How can it? It's just changing numbers in our bank accounts in its own monetary system run by its own Federal Reserve. Why do they say deficits are bad? Because they don't understand their own monetary system, and it is ruining our lives. Folks, it is ruining our lives. Will lower taxes today mean higher taxes later? Every year, taxes can be adjusted to make sure we have enough spending power to buy whatever we can produce and want to have. Taxes only have to be raised if we have too much spending power and the economy is doing so well and unemployment is so low, we want to cool things down with a tax increase to keep inflation where we want it. So lower taxes today mean prosperity today, and higher taxes later only if things get too good and we get worried about inflation. And that, my friends, is by Warren Mosler. Warren Mosler, folks. Warren Mosler. That's not Steve Grumbine saying that. Although people that I really don't care to even talk to would try and make it out to be that I said that. I just said what Warren said. So you know you're in good shape when you repeat it. I'm just a vessel. I'm just reading it to you. But I've given you the straight dope. That's the answer. I'm sticking with it. Now, you might ask why that matters. Well, if you know that it isn't your tax dollars that are funding somebody's abortions, or funding Israel, or funding bombs going off in the Middle East, or funding food stamps, or funding new hospitals, or funding a Green New Deal, or funding student debt eradication, or funding reparations, then all of a sudden we have a different conversation going on, don't we? We're no longer talking, you're stealing my hard-earned tax dollars, or taxes theft, or any of these other nonsensical things. You're no longer dealing with that kind of idiocy. Now you're dealing with what are our national priorities. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share the next one, which is this one right here is now Randall Wray. And this one is called What Are Taxes for? The MMT Approach. So let me go ahead and share this. And I'll put this up on the screen for you to see. And hopefully this works for you as well. So here we go. What are taxes for? So this is from Randy Wray's primer. He did some 30 some odd blog posts that turned into the Modern Money Primer. But here we go. This was written May 15th, 2014 by Randall Wray in New Economic Perspectives. This is part of a series following on from the last installment that asked, do we need taxes? Previously, we have argued that taxes drive money in the sense that imposition of a tax that is payable in the national government's own currency will create demand for that currency. Sovereign government does not really need revenue in its own currency in order to spend. Here, for dramatic effect, let me go ahead and read that again. Sovereign government does not really need revenue in its own currency in order to spend. Kind of sounds strange when you hear people talking about people bankrupting the nation, right? Makes you wonder what's wrong with them. So this sounds shocking because we are accustomed to thinking that taxes pay for government spending. This is true for local governments, provinces, and states that do not issue the currency. It's also not too far from the truth for nations that adopt the foreign currency or peg their own to gold or foreign currencies. When a nation pegs, it really does need the gold or foreign currency to which it promises to convert its currency on demand. Taxing removes its currency from circulation, making it harder for anyone to present it for redemption in gold or foreign currency. Hence, a prudent practice would be to constrain spending to tax revenue. But in the case of a government that issues its own sovereign currency without a promise to convert at a fixed value to gold or foreign currency, that is, the government floats its currency. We need to think about the role of taxes in an entirely different way. Taxes are not needed to pay for government spending. Further, the logic is reversed. Government must spend or lend the currency into the economy before the taxpayers can pay taxes in the form of the currency. Spend first, tax later is the logical sequence. Some who hear this for the first time jump to the question, well, why not just eliminate taxes altogether? Well, there are several reasons. First, as we said last time, it is the tax that drives the currency. If we eliminated the tax, people probably would not immediately abandon the use of currency, but the main driver for its use would be gone. Further, the second reason to have taxes is to reduce aggregate demand. If we look at the United States today, the federal government spending is somewhat over 20% of GDP, while tax revenue is somewhat less, say 17%. The net injection coming from the federal government is thus about 3% of GDP. If we eliminated taxes and held all that else constant, the net injection might rise toward 20% of GDP. Well, that's a huge increase of aggregate demand, and that could cause inflation. Ideally, it is best if tax revenue moves counter-cyclically, increasing in expansion and falling in recession. That helps to make the government's net contribution to the economy counter-cyclical, which helps to stabilize aggregate demand. So we covered these points the last time, in part due to a silly twit by Doug Henwood, who likened this to astrology. Not one to be bothered with embarrassment, he responded to the last blog post with this exchange. Jesse Meyerson. Well, Doug Henwood, success trolled MMT. Doug Henwood. Jesse Meyerson, this evades distribution. Taxes take resources from people who have too much and give them to people who have too little. Well, no. Taxes on the rich might take resources from people who have too much, if he means that their demand deposit account is debited. But taxation does not give them the resources, or give them the resources to the people who have too little. Rather, government spending directed toward those who have too little is what gives the poor access to resources. Folks, let me just hit that real quickly. So you understand, the fact is that we are not talking about, taxes. When we cut taxes here, that it goes somewhere. The taxation and spending are two totally separate things, two entirely different things. In other words, in order for it to help the poor, you've got to actually write a spending bill to help the poor, completely separate from the act of taxation. So why would someone worthlessly say that we've got to pay for Medicare for all with taxes? Why would someone worthlessly say that we've got to pay to eradicate student debt? Why would they worthlessly say we've got to pay higher taxes in order to have a Green New Deal? Seriously, you got to ask yourself this question, because I ask it every day. Why would someone worthlessly say that? Let's get back to the story. So he says, Henwood seems to imagine that the rich roll their wheelbarrows full of coins up to the Treasury Department steps, where armored trucks load the cash up and take it out to make payments to the poor. Doesn't work that way. Tax payments debit the accounts of taxpayers. If you've ever gone to a ball game, wow, this sounds like Mosler, doesn't it? If you ever gone to a ball game, you know that when the scorekeeper awards a run to Boston, he doesn't take it away from New York. Rather, he keystrokes runs to Boston. If after review of the video, the umpire has made an error, he debits the account of Boston. Where does the run taken away go? I don't know. Where does it go, Batman? Let's find out. Oh, he's got a great quippy answer. He says, that's a question for the physicist, not the economist. Where do tax payments go? Nowhere. A bank account is debited. I think it has something to do with the electrical charges changing from negative to positive, although some commentators told me it's all photons now. All I know is that taxes do not and cannot pay for spending. Folks, this is from Randall Wray. This isn't Steve Grumbine saying this. Let me repeat that just to make sure you heard it. All I know is that taxes do not and cannot pay for spending. We could put that to a nice click track and do the Bismarcky. All I know is that taxes do not and cannot pay for spending. Anyway, that's my Bismarcky for the day. In 1964 article, he emphasized that, let me go back up here one more notch. He says, all this was recognized by Beardsley Rummel, a New Dealer who chaired the Federal Reserve Bank in the 1940s. He was also the father of income tax withholding and wrote two important papers on the role of taxes. Taxes for revenue are obsolete in 1946, and tax policies for prosperity in 1964. Let's first examine his cogent arguments that sovereign governments do not need taxes for revenue, and turn to his views on the role of taxes. In his 1964 article, he emphasized that we must recognize that the objective of national fiscal policy is, above all, to maintain a sound currency and efficient financial institutions. But consistent with the basic purpose, fiscal policy should and can contribute a great deal towards obtaining a high level of productive employment and prosperity. Folks, man, that deserves a Bismarcky moment, but I'm going to let it slide. I'm just going to say it again. Fiscal policy should and can contribute a great deal toward obtaining a high level of productive employment and prosperity. 1964. Anyway, this view is similar to that propounded in and by MMT. He goes on to say that the U.S. government gained the ability to pursue these goals after World War II due to two developments. The first was the creation of a modern central bank. Boom. And the second was the sovereign issue of a currency that is not convertible into gold or some other commodity. With these conditions, with these two conditions, it follows that our federal government has final freedom from the money market and meeting its financial requirements. Folks, let me say that again, because that's like I pull clout, y'all. I pull clout, y'all. And when the mic is in my mouth, I turn it out, y'all. It's like that. Anyway. Says, with these two conditions, it follows that our federal government has final freedom from the money market in meeting its financial obligations or requirements. National states no longer need taxes to get the wherewithal to meet their expenses. Boom! Why then does the national government need taxes? He counts 4 reasons. 1, as an instrument of fiscal policy to help stabilize the purchasing power of the dollar. 2, to express public policy in the distribution of wealth and income, as the case of the progressive income and estate taxes. 3, to express public policy in subsidizing or in penalizing various industries and economic groups. And 4, to isolate and assess directly the costs of certain national benefits, such as highways and Social Security. In other words, it's an accounting tool. In other words, to show, yep, Chuck, we took this much money in. Yeah, we're going to kind of make it look like this because that way we're kind of, quote unquote, accounting for it. But it doesn't pay for jack diddly. Understand? Please, God, say you understand. Say yes. All right. So anyway, he says the first of these is related to the inflation issue we discussed above. The second purpose is to use taxes to change the distribution of income and wealth. For example, a progressive tax system would reduce income and wealth at the top while imposing minimal taxes on the poor. We all can agree to that, right? I mean, there's nobody disagreeing with that. What we're disagreeing with, and which is all these papers have so far stated clearly, is that taxes do not fund spending. Stop trying to find money to pay for programs. Stop trying to cut another program to find the money to pay for another program. That's simply economic illiteracy, should be shunned, shamed, and gotten rid of. No more room for Robin Hood, not when it comes to hijacking programs for the poor and for the planet and for people's health care. No more. None. You do it anymore, be expecting a freaking elbow of truth from the top rope. It's sickening. It's done. It's over. No more excuses. So anyway, down here, the next one is the third purpose is to discourage bad behavior, pollution of air and water, use of tobacco and alcohol, or to make imports more expensive through tariffs, essentially a tax to raise import costs and thereby encourage the purchase of domestic output. These are often called sin taxes, whose purpose is to raise the cost of the sins of smoking, gambling, purchasing luxury goods, and so on. You've heard me here call them Pigovian taxes. Look it up, Pigouvian, Pigovian. Okay? Anyway, the fourth is to allocate the cost of specific public programs to the beneficiaries. For example, it is common to tax gasoline so that those who use the nation's highways will pay for their use. Tolls on throughways are another way to do this. In other words, we have to tax. There needs to be a tax. So when we're figuring out the distribution of said taxes, why not put them towards the things we're not paying for them? Keyword, we're not paying for them, but we're using them as a way to assess a penalty, if you will, for the use of those things. All right. So note that while many would see these taxes as the means to pay for government spending, Rummel vehemently denies this view in his title to the other piece, Taxes for Revenue are Obsolete. Government does not need the gasoline tax to pay for highways. That tax is designed to make those who will use highways think twice about their support for building them. Government does not need the revenue from a cigarette tax, but would rather raise the cost to those who will commit the sin of smoking. Many would say it is only fair that those who will smoke will pay for this. The costs their smoking imposes on society in terms of hospitalizations for lung cancer, for example. From Rummel's perspective, this is not far from the truth. The hope is the high cost of tobacco will convince more people never to smoke, which thereby reduces the cost to society. However, the point is that not the revenue to be generated. Government can always find the money to pay for the hospital construction. Rather, it's to reduce the waste of real resources that must be devoted to caring for those who smoke. The ideal cigarette tax would be one that eliminated smoking, not one that maximized revenue to the government. Think about that, folks. Think about that. He said the public purpose, which is served by the tax, should never be obscured in a tax program under the mask of raising revenue. Think about that, please. It's not hard. It's just different. They're trying to dissuade a behavior. They're not trying to fund the government. Do you understand this? If you don't, we'll keep working on it together. That's how we do things. All right, next. We can then use this notion of the public purpose to evaluate which taxes make sense. I won't go through that today, but let me say that Rummel used the corporate income tax as an example of a particularly bad tax. You're going to love this. He's right. My professor, Hyman Minsky, always argued for abolishing that tax, and I wouldn't be surprised if he got the idea from Rummel. Of course, which tax do liberals love? Corporate income tax. They all want to increase it to pay for all the goodies they want to shower on the poor. In other words, they compound the confusion. Not only do they insist on being wrong about the purpose of taxes, but they also embrace one of the worst ones. Maybe a good topic for another blog or 1,000 of them. My God, it is still the most pervasive, nonsensical gibberish we on the left have to suffer through on a daily basis. It's ignorance in a chef's salad. It's like frigging the dumbest of the dumb, and it has eliminated our ability to do almost every meaningful piece of legislation out there. Call it a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the junk. That's what that is. All right. Rummel concluded both of his articles by arguing that once we understand what taxes are really for, then we can go about ensuring that the overall tax revenue is at the right level. Briefly, the idea behind our tax policy should be this: that our taxes should be high enough to protect the stability of the currency and no higher. Now, it follows that this principle that our tax rates can and should be lowered to the point where the federal budget will be balanced at what we would consider a satisfactory level of high unemployment. High unemployment. How ridiculous is that? All right. This principle is also one adopted in MMT, but with one caveat. Rummel was addressing the situation in which the external sector balance could be ignored, which is not unreasonable in the early post-war period. In today's world, in which some countries have very high current account surpluses, this is talking about trade, balance of trade, very high current account surpluses, and others have high account deficits, the principle must be modified. Folks, sectoral balances, I'm going to give you a quick blurb on this. You have private sector debt, you have public sector debt, and you have rest of world. Rest of world is the balance of trade. We a net importer, we a net exporter. Where are we at? We have a negative current account balance, or do we have a positive? Are we a surplus on the trade side or a deficit, whatever? The money, when you're a net importer that leaves the country, so to speak, as in the United States today, it's roughly about $500 billion a year. So $500 billion a year has left the country. We got to make up for it somehow or another. It leaves us two sectors to fill that tub back up with. One, private debt. Well, that's what they typically push us to. Credit cards, friggin' bank loans, foreclosures, payday lending, all kinds of financialized capitalism, non-productive financialized capitalism. And the other one is public debt, which is federal government spending on the people. which is what real progressives, which is what Bernie Sanders, which is what Stephanie Kelton, which is what MMT and as a whole is advancing, understanding spending on the public purpose. You get a lot of debt bubbles. What happens is that we push everyone to private debt. Eventually, the people that want to go to college have maxed out their capability of affording more college debt. Now they can't afford their house. They can't afford a car. They can't afford electricity. They can't afford a lot of things. So they have effectively stopped contributing to the economy because they're now just paying student debt back. Where's new money coming from? They got to create another debt bubble. They got to start the housing bubble again. They got to start the car bubble again. They got to start something again. So now all of a sudden the people that have credit, they start dumping it into these things. Maybe they create some new RV craze, whatever. Airplanes, the latest thing, whatever. And then they create a bubble there. And then they start creating these other asset bubbles on the back end. And they start financializing those things until we run out of credit-worthy people. And then we start creating junk bonds and junk things like the Big Short. Now all of a sudden we got more bubbles that burst and burst until the economy blows up. Instead of just deficit spending. Simple, right? Anyway. So the final paragraph here in Randall Wray's writing is, we would restate it as follows. Tax rates should be set so that the government's budgetary outcome, whether it is deficit, balanced, or in surplus, is consistent with full employment, like a job guarantee. A country like the U.S. with a current account deficit at full employment will probably have a budget deficit at full employment equal to the sum of the current account deficit and the current account deficit being the trade deficit and the domestic private sector surplus. In other words, money comes from the government. What we have is a surplus, meaning you and I, our bank accounts, we have a desire to save whatever. That money plus the current account deficit equal the money that's kind of set off. So they got to replace that to keep the bathtub full. Anyway. So he says a country like the U.S., blah, blah, blah. Country like Japan with a current account surplus at full employment will have a relatively smaller budget deficit at full employment equal to the domestic private sector surplus, less the current account surplus. Anyway, that right there, my friends, is Randall Wray. And I think that this is really important stuff. That article that I just read to you, that was the article. I don't know what your light bulb moments were, but that was my light bulb moment. That was the one that took me from being a LOL libertarian Ron Paul dummy and put me into the cool kids club, the true 1%ers that understand how money works. That one article flipped the script on everything. It took me days to come down from the high of waking up and realizing what the hell I just learned. It was just mind-blowing. That article alone, if I didn't read another article, now mind you, that's not including 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds, which is must read from Mosler. If it wasn't 70 some odd pages, I would have probably read it tonight. But it's a very, very great read, and you must read it. It's free. The link out there, if you look under 7 Deadly Innocent Frauds Updated, there is a PDF link. Download the damn book for free. Now, I do have it, just so you know. I mean, I do eat my own dog food. It's always right next to me. But then again, I have a bunch of books right next to me. But I want to take you to the logical end here. And that, I could have picked a million of these articles. I could have picked my own article. In fact, I wanted to pick my own article, but I figured that would be a little cheddar cheesy. So I went with Kelton. She's a little smarter than me. A little. Like a whole bunch more. But I want to read this because she creates a great analogy. And for those of you who haven't seen this before, I'm going to just show it to you momentarily. It'll probably kick it off. But this right here is her famous pony article. And let's see if I can even see it. Yep. So go back over here, bring it up. And bammo. So this right here is Kelton's book or article. And this right here is just, I don't know. when I saw this article come out, I was in heaven, because very rarely do we get this kind of cheddar. That's what I call stuff like this. Is like good eating, right? You don't get very many opportunities where you have a great article like that show up. So I'm going to go ahead and read it to you as well. And this is a lot shorter than the other one, so bear with me. So the article is titled, Congress Can Give Every American a Pony If It Breeds Enough Ponies, by Stephanie Kelton, September 28th, 2017. So this is like a year plus ago. Actually, it was right around the time of the first Modern Monetary Theory Conference that was out at UMKC. So anyway, we were all geeked and excited about this thing when it came up. And so what I'm going to do is I'll read it to you. She says, in 1860, Abraham Lincoln's campaign slogan was, vote yourself a farm. In 1900, William McKinley promised a full dinner plate. In 1928, Herbert Hoover won a landslide victory, pledging a chicken in every pot and a car in every garage. A free farm, a full belly, and a shiny new car. Today's Republicans would cringe at the thought of such rhetoric from their party's nominees. As Ronald Reagan taught, the government is your problem, not the solution to your problems. Democrats might blanch too, but for different reasons. They still believe in the power of the government to solve many problems, but they've absorbed the idea that everything must be paid for. The 2016 nominee is a case in point. In her book, Hillary Clinton mocks Senator Bernie Sanders' populist agenda. Bernie, I think America should get a pony. Hillary, how will you pay for the pony? Folks, I'm just going to stop right there. Whenever you hear these vote blue sycophants running around chanting their stuff and they act so high and mighty as if, it's just infuriating, right? And especially when you understand economics, because you can just sit back and kind of fold your arms and say, tell me all about it. Tell daddy where it hurts. Come on, tell daddy your stories. I got you covered. You just want to hear him talk, right? Because it's so lame. And you know the story. You know how this plays out. But, I've been trying to moderate my sarcasm just a little bit because I don't know how productive it is, but damn it, it feels good. So anyway, you might find Clinton's question intuitively reasonable. If you promise to fight for big things, then you should draw a detailed roadmap to the treasure chest that will fund them. Yeah, after all, the money has to come from somewhere. But what if I told you that your intuition was all wrong? What if it turned out that the government really could give everyone a pony and a chicken and a car? That is, so long as we could breed enough ponies and chickens and manufacture enough cars. The cars and the food have to come from somewhere. The money is conjured out of thin air, more or less. Let me explain. In school, you were probably taught the order of operations, PEMDAS. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. That mnemonic helps you handle tricky equations like this one. 3 to the 7th minus 2, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so it's like some long equation. I'm not going to read it out to you. And it was like when Clinton asks where all the money will come from, she's ordering the government's fiscal operations like so. Government collects money from us all in the form of taxes, T. Government figures out how much it wants to spend and then borrows any additional money it needs, B. Government spends the money it has collected, S. Since none of us learned any differently, most of us accept the idea that taxes and borrowing precede spending, tabs. And because the government has to find the money before it can spend in its sequence, everyone wants to know who's picking up the tab. There's just one catch. The big secret in Washington is that the federal government abandoned tabs back when it dropped the gold standard. Here's how things really work, folks, really work. Step 1, Congress approves spending and the money gets spent, S. Number 2, government collects some of that money in the form of taxes, T. If 1 is greater than 2, the Treasury allows the difference to be swapped for government bonds. In other words, the government spends money and then collects some of it back. as people pay their taxes and buy bonds. Spending precedes taxing and borrowing. STAB is the acronym. It takes votes and vocal interest groups, not tax revenue, to start the ball rolling. Folks, I want to hit that one hard real quick. I'm going to read it again because I think this is like one of the big takeaways here. And this is why we keep pounding on this. This is why you hear me over and over again saying what seems like it's probably the same story over and over again. And you know what it is? It doesn't get better. It doesn't get worse. It's the same story. The only difference is I try and translate current events through a lens that is proper instead of the bullshit you hear from alternative media that is just as sick and broken as the mainstream media. The only difference is they do it with a James Bond flair. So let's go ahead and read that again. In other words, the government spends money and then collects some of it back as people pay their taxes and buy bonds. Spending precedes taxing and borrowing. STAB. It takes votes and vocal interest groups, not tax revenue, to start the ball rolling. Can I get an amen? Can I get a whoop up in here? I'm about to bring Biz Marquee back out. I'm telling you. If you need proof that STAB is the law of the land, look no further than the Senate's recent $700 billion defense authorization. Without raising a dime from the rest of us, the Senate quietly approved an $80 billion annual increase, or more than enough money to make a 4-year public colleges and universities tuition free. Did you hear that? More than enough to make all these 4-year schools tuition free. Like that. But yet, worthless people will say, but what about hyperinflation? You can't just print real wealth. You can't do this. You can't do that. But then we just sat there and dropped 80 bills, 80 billion bills, and an increase to bump it up to 800 billion without raising a nickel of taxes for it. But the minute you say healthcare, people in the progressive community even forget the conservatives. My God. If we could just get progressives to think clearly, we'd be set. But we've got these people that want small government, don't understand taxes. They want to just burn it down, do this, do that. And they're destroying our chances of a real decent society, destroying it. Our own tribe. I can't even look at conservatives yet. We got to clean our own shop, right? All right, let's keep going. Whoa, a cowboy, are you telling me the government can just make money appear out of nowhere like magic? Oh, absolutely. Congress has special powers. It is the patent holder on the U.S. dollar. Folks, it is the patent holder on the U.S. dollar. No one else can legally create it. This means that Congress can always afford the pony because it can always create the money to pay for it. Folks, bam, bam, bam. Bust the cap and boom, 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 boom. Down. 187. LA trademark. But anyway, so that right there is like totally a downset moment right there. I'm telling you, man, it's like that breakdown in a mosh. You know, you're waiting for it. Hetfield goes back with his head like this. And all of a sudden it's like, you see the people stage diving and freaking spin in circles and wall of death and all. That's what that was right there. That's what that was. There's no excuses for not getting this anymore. None. Folks, I'm telling you right now, I want Scott Ian and Anthrax up here playing Caught in a Mosh. I mean, seriously. I mean, you just get charged up when you realize this. Let me read this again to you. Whoa, a cowboy, are you telling me that the government can just make money appear out of nowhere like magic? Absolutely. Congress has special powers. It is the patent holder on the U.S. dollar. No one else is legally allowed to create it. This means that Congress can always afford the pony because it can always create the money to pay for it. Chin, 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 You know what I'm saying? It's like riding that E string. That's all I can think of. You know, it's like Bismarck. God damn, it's good. So now that doesn't mean the government can buy absolutely anything at once in absolutely any quantity at absolutely any speed. Say a pony for each 320 million men, women, and children in the United States by tomorrow. That's because our economy has internal limits. In other words, we can't produce that many. It's not because we can't come up with the money for it. We can't produce that many. That's the problem. If the government tries to buy too much of something, it will drive the prices up as the economy struggles to keep up with the demand. All those real resources going to one thing. That's the problem, right? It's not the money. Inflation can spiral out of control. There are plenty of ways the government can get a handle on inflation, though. For example, it can take money out of the economy through taxation. Folks, this is simple stuff. The economy starts overheating, we're going to raise some taxes. That's it. So Clinton's pony was a metaphor for big ticket items on Sanders' agenda, namely tuition-free college and Medicare for all. Putting a fiscal twist on Nancy Reagan's famous catchphrase, Clinton scoffed. Clinton's a scoffer, by the way. Clinton scoffed at the price tag and warned voters to just say nay. But Americans still like Sanders' idea. 63% support free tuition, 66% support Medicare for all. To make these policies work, all we have to do is propose enough hospitals, doctors, nurses, universities, teachers. Just imagine how high those poll numbers would climb if everyone understood how easy it would be for Congress to pony up. Now, folks, I'm telling you right now, you absolutely just have to hate us. You have to hate each other. You have to hate your own children. You have to hate yourself to choose not to get this. You got to literally despise yourself. You got to literally want people to die. Oh, did he say that? Yes, he did. Why should I be kind about this? People have teeth rotten out of their mouth. Why? Because you don't want to learn this? Grow up, Peter Pan, Count Chocula. It's time. It's absolutely time. The next person that sends you some stupid global research CA article in the middle of the night about the demise of the dollar, they aren't your friend. And if they are your friend, then help them learn this. Don't run from the subject. Don't run from the subject. It's too important. It's way, way too important to allow people to sideline us like this. It is way too important. Every time you allow Lee Camp to talk about petrodollars or some other nonsense, when you know clear, you didn't hear one thing about petrodollars in any of this, did you? Not one. Now, let me tell you something. This is important, so we see it in context with all the reading I just gave you. 3 very important articles. Gasoline products, oil, is a real resource. It's a scarce real resource. And everything that we have, from plastics that make our mouse to every device we use, our computers, our cars, our wheels, our tires, the pipes and everything, every piece of PVC, you name it, has petroleum products in there. Everything has petroleum products, even nuclear plants have oil products for the gears and stuff and the hydraulics, you name it. Oil products, gas products in general, are ubiquitously used in just about every single meaningful, productive thing we do. So is it a petrodollar? No, because it's no more than a petro yen or a Chinese renminbi or yuan or British pound, UK pound sterling. None of it. Literally every one of us, until somebody gets off of this petro product, fossil fuels, and goes to green energy, everyone would be impacted in shortages of gas. Everyone would be impacted by it. Wait till you see what it's like to have shortages for water. Wait till you see what it's like to have shortages for other food products. Wait till you see what it's like to have shortages for almost everything, because we haven't figured out that we can have nice things. And it's when you have shortages that you create criminals. And when you create criminals, that's when you create violence. And when you create violence, that's when you have bloodshed and civil war. And that's what you're seeing right now with the yellow vests and other things, because people have gotten fed up with neoliberal austerity. And if you listen to Alan Nasser, who said things in such a gentlemanly way the other day, I mean, Alan Nasser, literally, just so you understand how much it touched me, had me in tears once I got off the air with him. His voice was angelic. The man was a genius. He was a sweet man. He is a sweet man. But I sat there and listened to him, and I thought to myself, I don't know if enough people are going to hear him. I want to get his word out there. I don't know if enough people are going to hear Mosler. I want to help get Mosler's word out there. I don't know if enough people are hearing Kelton. I want to get Kelton's words out there. I don't know if anybody hears Randall Wray, because Randall Wray doesn't do Twitter and he doesn't do Facebook. So you got to find him. I mean, I love him. And Bill Mitchell, I didn't pull Bill Mitchell's in here. I should have, but it would have been a long read, and I already had 3 articles to read. I could have pulled Ellis's in, but I can pull Ellis in some other time, and we can do a show about Ellis's writing. But I want you to understand how vital this is. It's not a petrodollar. Your alternative media has failed you miserably when it comes to economics. Your third parties out there, especially the Green Party and others, have failed you. They've allowed economic illiteracy to cloud your mind with worse mysticism than the mainstream orthodox economics has done. Why is that? Because mainstream orthodox economics is naturally more conservative. When you're looking to these folks as lefties and they're still appealing to authority, to this moronic belief, or they're creating new pharaohs and they're creating new conspiracies instead of just telling you the straight scoop. Do you think that, I'm serious about this. Do you think when they lie to you and tell you false stories about the Fed, or they create like false narratives about the Rothschilds and try and make you think that the Jews own you and all, do you think that's healthy? I mean, seriously, do you think that's quality? I really, I want to know if you really believe that they're doing you a service when they do this stuff. Are they really representing you when they do that? I'd like to think not. But I see a lot of people say this dumb stuff. And I don't understand what the appeal is. I don't. It's disgusting to me. And then I see people defend these people like kindred spirits. I'm like, they aren't my kindred. My kindred doesn't want to be lied to. My kindred, when they hear the truth, doesn't sit there and double down to green the dollar. My kindred learn. Maybe that's why I'm not surrounded by millions of people. I'm only surrounded by tens of hundreds or whatever. But the point is that I don't want to be lied to. I get disgusted by people that are okay with a lie as long as it's their friends telling it. I gave you a master's course in taxation today. And I gave you at least an undergraduate level understanding of deficit spending and why we can afford a Green New Deal. Folks, we're talking about marking up accounts and marking down accounts. There is no such thing as being captured by the private Federal Reserve. You kind of really hate everyone to say something like that. I mean, you got to be so misguided. You're marking accounts up and you're marking them down. It's nothing more than that. When Congress authorizes spending, it happens, period. It's that simple. And yet we've got to complicate the hell out of it. Why? Why is that? Why do you allow it? Let me ask, why do you personally allow them to lie to you? Why aren't you deeply offended that they're lying to you? And I'm going to tell you, it's easy to say, well, shit, I didn't know this before, so my goodness, I don't know what to do with, how, man, it's hard for me to judge them when I didn't know it at one point in time. Well, here's the problem, and I'm going to be real blunt. I've been following MMT now for about 10 years. And I didn't always start out full of piss and vinegar. It took me a while. And I was sitting there and I was largely in a libertarian world. And I was surrounded by people that were talking about the value of the dollar and wealth, real wealth, and the gold standard. And my goodness, Austrian economics and praxeology is where it's at. And I listened to this and I was like, oh, I'm on the fence. I don't really know what's going on, man. It took some convincing. Didn't take much, but it did take some. Once I was convinced, I started realizing the MMTers were really nice people. They were really, really nice people. And they had small little groups of people that were listening to them. And they were ravenously supportive. It was tiny little cliques. I mean, tiny little cliques. You want to see how tiny the world is in this regard? Go to Walmart sometime. You get in an Uber car like my friend Guy talk to somebody and say, hey, do you know about modern monetary theory? They're going to be like, huh? So what? Do the what? We've gotten cordoned off into this nice little box here in Facebook land where we sometimes think more people know MMT than they really do. Because Facebook has cut off the spigot, kind of limited the reach. But just earlier tonight, I was only like 6 degrees of separation in some other group. And some guy goes, you expect me to believe this garbage about taxes? I was like, oh man, fresh meat. Shit, man. I've been eating on these freaking bones for so long, gnawing on the marrow. Freaking finally some red meat. That's how starved it's been because of the Facebook algorithms. So you got to go out there and you got to intermingle amongst the Democrats that, the vote blues that don't listen to you anyway. You got to go out there deeper into the green land where it's a little weird, man. I ain't gonna lie. It's real weird because, man, they're creating a whole new world, man. They don't know anything about the economic system, but damn it, they are going to create a new one. They're going to go the extra mile. They're going to skip learning how it works now. They're going to create a new one from scratch. So you're not dealing in facts. You're not dealing in logic. You're dealing in a whole bunch of mysticism and crystal balls and smoke and, friggin' tinfoil on one side, standing on one leg, rubbing their belly and patting their head on the other. And it's hard. You got to find a way to work through that just to get to the nut that says, guys, do you know that they just keystroke this shit in? All your dancing and all your friggin' ballet to, like drum circles. It doesn't equal economics. I'm telling you. I'm sorry. I wish I want to make you feel good. I can't. You're just way out there. Sorry. I can't find a way to make you look good. I tried. It didn't work. It's just shit. Okay. It's just garbage. I tried. I mean, I sat there and said, I can't even do an interpretive dance to this, man. There's just no fixing this, man. It's foobar. It's bullshit. Sorry. I can't make it better. You can't shine a turd. It's just bunk. But when you realize how simple it is, now all of a sudden, all those dreams, those left dreams, all the dreams the Green Party has, all the dreams that the Socialist Alternative have, all the DSA have, they all can come to be. Much simpler, much faster, and much more efficiently, and much more humanely. Probably not a whole lot of bloodshed required. Probably the only bloodshed you're going to require is the nicking of your cheek when you're shaving your fresh beard. Get a piece of toilet paper, stop it up. There's the bloodshed. Because the system's already here. So now, instead of trying to shoehorn Marx in there, instead of trying to shoehorn the Venus Project in there, instead of trying to shoehorn some other crazy, nonsensical thing you're coming up with in your head, let's find out what reality is and see what kind of powerful things we can do. Because your imagination is the limit here, and real resources. Anyway, I hope tonight was fun for you. I enjoyed it. I'm going to probably do these more often. I felt like it was worth reading these things because those are words from the developers. These folks have done the hard work. You can look them up online. Dr. Stephanie Kelton, Professor Stephanie Kelton at Stony Brook University, Professor L. Randall Wray, Bard College, Levy Institute, formerly UMKC, and of course, Warren Mosler. Find him at Mosler Economics. Guy's just a great human being, ran for governor of the Virgin Islands. Sadly, they chose poorly. Regardless, this guy's great. Please look them up and follow us here at Real Progressives. We'll do our best to keep it real. In the meantime, have a great night, everyone. I'll see you all tomorrow night. Hopefully, I have a great show for you then as well. Have a good night. Bye-bye.